Hi everyone. So I think we'll get started now. Thanks for coming to our event, a conversation with Dr. Thomas Zurbuchen. So this is a next generation of lunar scientists and engineers event. We're an early career group and we provide networking and guidance to early career lunar scientists and engineers. This should be the first event in our Lunar Workforce Series, focusing on the lunar workforce. My name's Alicia. I'm the chair of NextGen, and we also have Amanda who's going to be helping me out. So Amanda, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Amanda Stoddardman. I'm at the University of Arizona. I'm finishing up graduate school right now and about to start a postdoc at JSC.
Awesome. Congrats on the postdoc. Great. Okay, so I just want to remind everyone of our code of conduct. So our group expects organizers and participants alike to contribute to a harassment-free environment for all. You can read our full code of conduct on our website. In terms of questions, this is the Q&A event. So if you want to raise your hand to ask a question, feel free to. If you feel more comfortable, we have Slido, which is a website where you can upload your questions and upvote your favorite ones. And when you do ask your question, if you're going to unmute yourself, please introduce yourself first. So your name and occupation. And we will be prioritizing early career questions, just FYI. And also we are recording this event and posting it on our YouTube. So if you don't want your voice recorded, please just use the Slido. Thanks. So just to introduce our speaker, we have with us Dr. Thomas Zurbuchen. So Dr. Zurbuchen is a Swiss-American astrophysicist, leader, and innovator. He received his PhD from the University of Bern in Switzerland. He then became a professor of space science and aerospace engineering at the University of Michigan, where he founded the Center for Entrepreneurship at the College of Engineering. And then from October 2016 until the end of 2022, he was the longest continually running associate administrator for the Science Mission Directorate at NASA. He oversaw all NASA science missions. Among them were JWST, the Perseverance and Ingenuity Mars landings, the DART mission, and many others for which he was responsible and to the success of which he contributed majorly. So just want to thank Dr. Zurbuchen for joining us today. And yeah, I think we can get started. If anyone has any questions already, please unmute yourself and raise your hand. And if not, we also have some prepared questions in the slide already. So does anyone have a starting off question? Who's feeling brave?
If not, what I could do is kind of tell you for 2-3 minutes why I care about this community.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, thank you.
If that's okay. So,
yeah.
So first of all, everybody should call me Thomas. I kind of, with my kind of last name, it's usually easier than the Swiss name, which means by the beech tree, by the way. So it's one of those nature names. So apparently my ancestors lived next to beautiful trees, beautiful enough that they made it into the name. So what I wanted to tell you is I remember coming to NASA in late 2016, and basically what happened is the lunar program was largely speaking LRO, Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which of course is an absolutely fabulous mission and has just done incredible work. And especially the I suspect that the University of Arizona, you perhaps worked with that mission, just kind of, if you look at the publications of that mission, it by far exceeds any other kind of modern lunar things. The one thing I knew about, though, is I grew up, actually, the lab that I did my PhD in, where I sat, was behind a machine that was no longer in use. And it was a machine that was built to analyze samples from the moon in the Apollo program. So my PhD was in the 90s, late 90s, but nonetheless, and the Apollo program, as you know, was, decades before. But basically what had happened is the first experiment that was deployed on the surface of the moon was this, with the astronauts, right after the famous sentence, "One step for man," remember that sentence? Kind of from history class, just like me, because I was not there. I don't remember that. I was too young. I was less than a year old when that happened, right? The first experiment that was set up was a sail that actually collected solar wind, from the sun into an aluminum foil, into a clean aluminum foil, and then was built in Switzerland, which is why I knew about it. In addition to that, lunar rocks that came back also were sent to Switzerland. So I knew because of that, and because of some of the early work, kind of the amazing work that happened, looking for with infrared type of instrument at the surface, that the kind of water could in fact be present, right? Kind of that I really felt that our understanding of the moon has really changed, right? So kind of going to the moon was not going back to kind of the same celestial body we left, but it's going back to a new kind of a body with new questions that was really, really different. So basically, that was even amplified in my mind because I built an instrument on the messenger mission, and I worked on that before. So kind of the relationship of the moon and on Mercury, and what's the same and what's different, I found extraordinarily exciting, especially because of the fact that most celestial bodies have some processes like the moon have, like space weathering on the surface, like kind of impacts on top of it, kind of the whole scars of the history of the solar system. So when I came to NASA, it's like, it's like, where's the lunar program? The answer is we don't have a lunar program. We're going to Mars. And I thought I was really crazy. It's like, wait, so the moon is the only object we're not interested in the solar system. We're going to asteroids, and the moon is the one I'm seeing every night. And I actually had tried really hard to go to the moon with an instrument myself, just because I think I'd like to look up at night and say, hey, my instrument is there right now. And I lost some proposals and so forth, a different story. So basically what made me sad though is that the lunar community was a pretty aged community, very experienced, and kind of, I make a joke that says, like, you always could figure out where the lunar community was. It's a bunch of old men talking about Apollo, right? Kind of, and I mean everything I just said, right? Kind of, it's not very diverse, not very kind of modern data driven, but I thought it was really changing. And so basically I came in, and of course with the new administration coming in, built the CLIPS program, and I remember I came up with that one night just before we had to submit the budget. It was like, let's do, like, what's the fastest initiative we could do at the moon, so we came up with the commercial Lunar Payload Services program, which has advantages and disadvantages. It's one of the many things we're doing at the moon. But frankly, the reason I did that, and I'll stop talking in 1 minute, I promise, but the reason I did that is for two reasons. The first one is we wanted to do something at the moon because of the kind of strategic orientation to the moon. But for me, it was also a tool to really do the science that I knew was coming, which is like, hey, this is a really different celestial body. And you look at the decadal that just came out, that really tells you, wow, there's a lot of important questions that happen at the moon, and we need to handle. But I want to tell you, in addition to that, one of the reasons we structured it that way, and also because of the lunar core, where the Apollo lunar core, the Angsta core, right? Kind of, I drove that also, right? I actually asked for that. Like, I want that to release, is to really build the community. Because see, what's happening is with astronauts going to the surface of the moon, coming with samples from the polar regions, with robots going to the moon, we need amazing, innovative scientists that really can take advantage of that. And in many ways, it's the best time for lunar science yet to come, because you're going to have so much activity driven by a variety of elements that frankly you can kind of think of your career not like other planetary scientists. See what happens if you work on Europa Clipper. I mean, just as an example, JUICE was this morning. I set the alarm really early and watched. I hope you did too. So you go work on one of these missions. You perhaps design the instrument. You wait for the years, till 2030 until it's there. Then you do work, that's a large fraction of your career. Perhaps you do one more, right? Kind of if you're really a Europa scientist or something like that, you do one more, like because Clipper goes there also, and you're going to use the data. But there's not many missions because it takes so long. See what the lunar science promises is that you can really iterate much more quickly and go to the moon seamlessly. That for me is a new way of doing planetary science. And I think the same will happen for Mars. I think the same will happen for asteroids because of the emergence of cheaper, more affordable commercial things. But I think the lunar community that is built here is in many ways, and I'm so glad you're here, it's because you're going to be carrying that flag, right? Kind of really inventing a new way of doing science in a planetary body, kind of in a way that nobody has done in the past. It is very different. Like in Apollo, science was like, I always say, like the tick on the deer, right? The deer is going somewhere, the tick just rides along, tries to survive, right? But so no, this is kind of the way science it can be done here is really iteratively kind of come up like innovatively and very productively in a way that you can really dream up things, go try them, and this is what fits into your career. So that's why I care about it. At the end, there's important science tools for that, but the most important thing to make that happen is the workforce, and that's who you are. So that's why I was so excited to talk to this group. So hopefully by now you have a question.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. We have one question that has been upvoted a couple times. How does one get involved in NASA leadership? Are there specific steps that students or early career folks should take if they aspire to be in NASA leadership roles?
So look, I mean, I must, like in many ways, I'll give you two answers, right? How do you get involved in NASA leadership? So I think the first thing you should consider doing is doing some work at NASA headquarters or at the NASA center. Just go in and get to know the agency, right? There are things called IPAs, right? For example, you can be an employee of a university and go in for 2 years and then go back to your university. So you actually always get the university salary, but you go in to the government, come out. So kind of for me, what you want to do is kind of get involved on the inside. That's one track. The other track that I used is more getting involved on the outside, kind of my version of that. And I think you read my resume is like I started building space instruments and running missions at the university, just like you do at the University of Arizona or UCLA or other places, right? And then basically I volunteer my time being on advisory bodies for NASA. And, so I actually knew the agency pretty well from the outside, and I had worked with them from the inside, and then I got the job at the top. That's usually not the right strategy, right? Kind of. So I did not build a strategy that says eventually I want to run science at NASA. I just don't think that's, it's like I would say strategic plan Pope. The good news is you can describe the job really well. The bad news is the likelihood is almost zero that you get it, right? But for me, it's more about really kind of getting to know the work and then finding opportunities, and really the most important thing, put your hat in the ring. Right? What happens so often that people actually have these aspirations, but they're not actually competing. And I think it's perfectly fine to compete and lose. I lost a number of times. I think it's a really good training ground to win, right? So kind of for me, that's what I would say. I hope that's useful. Otherwise, ask a question again, whoever did.
Yeah, I think you answered the question quite well. Alicia, do you have something to say?
I think maybe we can ask another question. I think you kind of touched on this in your introduction a bit, but one of our questions was, what differences do you see between the kind of lunar community in your time and now? Like, do you think that there's been a lot of change in that time, and where do you see it going, like in the future, and like how can we kind of make our voices heard, like in terms of early career people, like with all these upcoming CLIPS missions and everything?
So I think it's day and night. I mean, I think the lunar community, look, I mean, the lunar community has always done important things. And when I talk about old man, you should recognize I know who I am, right? But I also believe that diversity matters in all dimensions. So basically, it would be very unwise to not listen to people with experience. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't lead. I really expect this generation to lead. I expect that you actually voice your opinion. You make sure, like for me, like the problems that need to be addressed, right? Kind of think of the CLIPS mission. So first of all, they need to work. It's not proven yet that they work, right? So there's actually a risk that is associated with that. So you need to work on more than one of them, right? Kind of you need to spread out a little. Bethany Ehrman is building this satellite that's going to go to the moon, right? Kind of like work on more than one thing, right? Kind of work on a science question and then kind of figure out where all the data are that you can get for this. So that's what I would really recommend. Kind of again, because of the fact there's many shots on goal. Don't over focus. Don't use the old model, like where like somebody works on Clipper and that's all they do, right? Kind of so don't kind of spread out. Now the disadvantage of that is that the kind of financial model of that needs to adjust. Now I'm actually not sure the right financial models are in place. If I was in this group, what I would do is advise NASA what the right financial models are. Okay, I'm going to give you a model, right? It could be that what NASA should do is put a call out for science centers that focuses on CLIPS data and modern novel data coming in. And basically science centers that are 5 years long and basically pay early career scientists and some others to really analyze that and advance the state of the art of science. So it could also be that some science centers like that are really focused on the human exploration interactions and really actually learn that. I actually don't think we're doing that work right now. I think it's absolutely important and it needs to be led by science. So it's not one of those things. I know you're going to work at Johnson, right? So it's not one of those things where a Johnson civil servant tells you what's going to happen, right? For me, this needs to be science driven. For the lunar science of human exploration to be breakthrough meaningful, science needs to drive it. I don't think we have a tool right now. So I would propose to NASA, here's what you need to do. Like invite them, like Nikki Fox, Lori Glaze, like this what you should do, right? And so it could also be that there's a fellowship that needs to be attached, like the Hubble Fellows for Astrophysics. There's kind of a fellowship that should be attached. Call it the lunatics or whatever, like some kind of lunar fellow, right? Kind of that ship that could be there. So for me, it's think through the workforce side of it and really figure out what is needed. So kind of our focus has been my personal focus, NASA, was to just get started with the lunar program. And it's really, like the way you do these kind of innovative things as you build the bridge you walk on, right? It was too early to build that last year, but it should probably be built a year from now or 2 years from now. So that needs to be communicated. I don't know whether that's useful.
Yeah, no, that's definitely useful. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I guess you see that in the Apollo missions, engineering was kind of driving it. That's what you're saying. And now we want science to be driving it. Rather than the engineering side. Yeah, that makes sense.
And at the beginning, right, we need to learn it again. So kind of engineering in the first landing has a bigger role. But the trick really is to learn how to integrate human exploration into science in a way that it actually maximizes the science output. So it's not like, okay, first we're going to take pictures and till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we have 10 more minutes to do science. And we called science taking a picture. That's not science. It's taking a picture. It's called tourism. That's not science, right? The only pictures that matter are the ones that are actually driven by science interest. So what is the science interest? Yes, we want the astronaut to be a geologist, for example. That's why it's important that we have the right astronauts. But also, like, what is the astronaut getting input from? Like, is there a room somewhere on Earth that actually is connected to, with high bandwidth video, and kind of you have an AI process that you build to kind of figure out where the interesting rocks are that you actually go get, right? And you do that near real times to help the astronaut, give them like 2-3 targets to go find the right rocks to bring back, right? And so for me, it's these kind of ideas that I'm making it up as I go. What I'm saying is probably 50% wrong. Figure out which 50, right? I don't know what the right way is, but it's really clear. The modality that we need to design has not been designed. There's no experience anywhere on Earth for that, other than perhaps firefighting or kind of emergency operations, for example, underwater welding after oil rigs break, or kind of volcano research and things like that, right? In which you have drones and humans interacting, doing things. So there are some places where this kind of modality exists. And so kind of, if it was me, I tried to figure out where they are. Where can I learn about it? There's many other ideas I'm just riffing on too.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. One question we have that's been upvoted, I guess, so it is, what path did you / your career take to becoming a part of NASA leadership? Because your path was not direct because you came over from Switzerland. So I guess, could you speak a bit about that? Like what kind of path it was and whether it was direct or indirect?
So you talk about let me talk quickly about my philosophy of career planning. I think it's really stressful and possibly ineffective to make a 20-year career plan. I don't believe in that at all. I don't know how to do that. There are people who want to do that. It's like, I want to be a full professor, when they like start their grad school. And I like, first of all, there's advantages to being a full professor. I used to be one. But there's also disadvantages, right? So there's other opportunities out there also. So I don't know. But what I'm really suggesting to everybody that I advise is to kind of micro-optimize your careers, right? If you're during your PhD, learn the maximum you can, kind of make the contacts also beyond your departments, go to other seminars. Kind of PhDs are about like, learning. Yes, you want to do your thesis, but you're not an employee primarily, you're a student primarily, right? Kind of, and get that thesis done, of course, because that's what you want to do, but do so you have an open mind. Like, I spent most Saturday mornings in the library during my PhD. Like, I just sat in the library and started reading, like whatever was there. I know libraries are different today because, like, remember they used to still print journals, and and I just like looked at what interested me, so I just read things. And so for me, do that. Like, but once you're done with the postdoc, right? So for me, or kind of you're jumping into a postdoc. Postdocs are, to me, it was probably the most productive time of my career, because in many ways I learned the most. Like, for me, the most important thing there is to really look at your postdoc advisor. Let me just tell you, if the postdoc advisor has a horrible reputation for the last 10 years, the likelihood that you have a great experience is not high. I just like get data. And the way you do this is you call up people who used to work for the postdoc, for the person, not the ones that are there now. Because remember the power dynamics, right? Kind of, that's how I chose my bosses. I literally chose the guy I took over other offers because his reputation was that he helps early career people. And that's exactly what happened, right? So for me, his name was Islan Fisk. That's the guy who hired me and helped me, right? So for me, so you take that step. For me, that meant I got an open-ended research job, not a tenure job. I actually got offers for assistant professorships, but I turned them down because, and remember, this is Thomas, don't listen too well. But I thought an assistant professorship is like the most horrible job you could possibly have, because somebody says there's a race for 6 years and you need to be perfect on all these dimensions. And then we do thumbs up and down. It's like some modern gladiator game. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So what I'm going to do entirely, I don't need the tenure. I just, people who are performing well, they don't need 10 years, right? So I just basically said, I'm going to build a research program and do the best research program. So I did build a research program. So I was a research scientist and I had the largest research program in the department. Then the university came, it's like, hey, we would like you to be a professor. It's like, yeah, fine, but not an assistant professor. So I got promoted into the associate. There's many others who, by the way, you have to find your own. Again, for me, it's less about, even if the goal was to get a full professorship, like get the maximum, like create joy, create success in the period you're in. And then for me, it was really about kind of 5 years or so into full professorship. Like I really felt I didn't learn so much. Frankly, I felt often I was in the way of my early career scientists. So what I started to do is reverse mentor them. So in other words, I put them in charge and I demoted myself to the number 2, right? And frankly, they're all professors now, right? And I also turned the projects over. So they have money in their names because I'm like, okay, so I'm going to do something. So for me, it's like, so I'm going to now abstract, right? The trajectory to becoming AA for me was one that was broken into pieces of, 3 to 5 years in which I tried to maximize my learning. Every next job I took had only 2 questions associated with it. The first one is, will I learn something entirely new? What will I learn? Is this exciting? And at the end of that job, do I have more or less opportunities than the opportunities I have right now? If the answer is more, I'm taking it. So I think of that. So it's less, I want to be the AA of science. It's more, I'm moving towards a leadership group, but I'm really getting experience in different things, right? And so, so when I took my entrepreneurship work, like most scientists told me I'm wrong. Like there's scientists, like members of the academy, I'm not going to mention names, but senior members that in conferences that told me you're wasting your career. That those very senior members are now thanking me for doing what I did, right? Because I managed to, I don't know whether you know this, but I managed to increase the budget of science from 5.6 to close to $8 billion. That had never happened before, right? Why did I do? I only got the job because I did that entrepreneurship work, even though it looked like a sidestep. Now, I did not plan to do this, but it equipped me to do this. So kind of don't over focus, but really try to drive towards a set of experiences that equip you for many jobs. If you, like me, kind of resonate with being a leader, get leadership experiences, kind of, and again, it's not 1 year, it's not 1 month, it's kind of, my feeling is it's like 3 to 5 years. That's what it takes me to learn a job usually. I don't know whether that's useful.
Yeah, no, that's definitely useful. Thank you. Yeah, super, super good advice for keeping, a well-rounded background. Yeah, it makes sense. I think we'll do an audience question next. Does anyone want to raise their hands and unmute themselves? I think we have a question. Yeah, Catherine?
Hi. So one of the things that you briefly mentioned, kind of in passing, how that there's the volcanologists using drones and AI for different things. One of the situations that I've encountered is a lot of more senior scientists will basically say AI just makes lazy scientists. Obviously, for those who understand how to use AI to a degree, that AI is not for analysis, it is for recognizing patterns, or what you're basically looking for. You're not letting AI do the work for you. I assume AI is not the only method for which this can be something. How, as a young professional in the field, can we kind of fight that resistance to change, especially from more senior members of the community who are well respected, who might be editing journals and might not want to have AI content? How do we navigate that?
I think it's a really good question, and it turns out it's a question that is true for every generation. I almost got fired when, as a postdoc, for putting data out. So, remember, now data are public. I was not the case when I started, and I felt it was just insane that we had all these data and nobody wanted to use the data. I almost got fired, and Lenfis protected my job, right? Because somebody else wanted to fire me. And I'm like, what happened, right? It was data that like 10 people on Earth used, and it became data that hundreds of people on Earth used, that the publications were up 10x or 100x because the data were some of the most useful data, right? So the way you look, what's really important, so look, life is about having opposing thoughts in your mind and struggling with it. That is actually what success looks like, right? So it's almost never one or the other. So depending on where you are in your position, right? There's certain places you protect your, like flying into people's face and screaming at, even if you're right, is probably not a good, kind of entirely in that direction is not a good idea. On the other hand, listening to them and doing what they're saying is also not a good idea. What you need to do is the way new technologies get adopted in an old field is by success. So create experiments that demonstrate success. And solve a problem that they can't solve with a new tool. And it's like, here's the solution. It's like, how did you, but test it with your own method. Is it is it the right, you create success, and success shuts off. The people who don't shut off after success, right? They cannot, they're believers, but you cannot change them, right? They're not scientists, you know what I mean? Scientists are doubters and are, whatever, professional doubters, right? So part of it, what they're trying to do is they're trying to help you, but what's really important is to figure out when not to listen. So I would spend time, every Friday I'm going to work on my own projects that have nothing to do with my advisor. And I'm going to figure out some successful things there, right? I'm going to waste my time on an experiment, right? So I did a lot of things. The experiment that turned out to be on Mercury is one of those things. I just figured, I started playing, built some code, and it's like, and then I needed 5K. I got 5K from somebody. By the way, the guy is now the president of the University of Illinois, who gave me the 5K. He was at the University of Michigan, and I told him that story once in front of an audience, right? It's like, look, you gave me 5K, and it basically enabled that instrument. That flew, and it helped make my career, right? So, and again, I did what I'm not supposed to do. Then people swooped in and wanted to take over. And I basically said, no, I'm only working on it if I'm in charge of the money. So so every once in a while you have to be hard, right? Now, in this case, Fisk again stood up for me and said, yes, this is the future and we're going to support them. And the others just, agreed. But it took 10 years until I became a co-I of that mission, even though I ran the instrument, because the system was too slow. So I hope the system is faster now. Like when I was at NASA, I really motivated people to change a lot. The most important advice is don't listen too well. Success does not mean to listen 100%. Success, use your instinct, try it out, and come up with bite-sized experiments in which you can prove yourself, help your instinct, test your instincts. Like, okay, my instinct is this. Can I prove that it's right? Go on these experiments. Really, that's a really essential part of growing your own path, right? The way Charlie Towns described it. By the way, he wrote a book called How the Laser Happened. So remember, Charlie Towns is a Nobel Prize winner for the laser. And there's some things in the book that I may not totally agree, but the way he described it is he basically said, you know, science is like a path, like a mountain path, and everybody goes down the same path, and kind of that's what people are trained. And he says, stop and turn over and look under the rocks by the wayside. That's where the new ideas are. So kind of don't rush down where everybody else is. Like turn over, play around, like use your brain, kind of bring another colleague in another organization, start playing. Like, so you push each other, right? So those are good ideas. Is that useful?
Yes, thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for that question. Does anyone else in the audience want to ask a question or unmute themselves? Okay, we can ask another question from the Slido. So this one is kind of an interesting question, and it's been upvoted a lot. So what was the most frustrating or difficult part of working at NASA HQ?
I think it's, you know, so the job I had, right? The job Nikki Fox has now. By the way, she's amazing. You really need to invite her also. But the job that I had is really kind of the top job right under the politics. So you get a big dose of politics like every day. And kind of the most frustrating part is kind of just the political operators that are around. Some of them are amazingly good, right? I actually really loved working with each one of the administrators, including Senator Nelson, who's there now. I mean, I think he's just a lovely guy, just truly interested, enthusiastic, and he taught me things I didn't know. But there's kind of this middle tier of politicians, and some of them are just low quality. And they use a lot of time, right? And so basically the trick is to, how do I not lose time on them? So it takes a lot of patience, and it, you know, it's got all people things, right? So it's kind of noisy, but it's not value add, right? So that I found that hard. I'm naturally an impatient person, right? So kind of for me, it felt like it aggravated every one of my senses, you know. So I mean, that's how I would talk about it. That's the most frustrating, and you know, so you get decisions, you build a really good program, and then there's a curveball, a political curveball. There's no rhyme or reason, so you have to deal with it. So, you know, but that's part of the job. That's why you do it, right? It's not, I'm not surprised. You can't go make that job, part of the job, go away. That is the job, to interface with politics, but it's also frustrating.
Yeah, I can understand that balancing everyone's like needs and everything. Yeah. Okay, does anyone have a question from the audience? No?
Yep.
Oh, Hanal, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Hinal from postdoc from Stony Brook University. So I wanted to ask that what should be the goal or perspective for postdoc? I mean, it's a short journey, and I just wanted to have the idea, like, what you think on that, and how can we bridge from postdoc to permanent positions? That is what I want to know from your point of view.
So I consider postdocs an essential part of the education. I don't think as postdoc as the first job. I think of it as the last post of the educational journey. What a postdoc is kind of a 1 to 2 year, kind of ideally, kind of educational finishing school. The goal is that you come up with your own ideas, that you work in a construct in which you don't have to come up with all the money yourself, all the, you know, all the science infrastructure yourself, but you really can develop your own ideas. And with that, kind of turn it, you know, kind of create whatever is the next opportunity in your journey. So for me, I mean, and there's other ways you can call that, right? But I think what happens after the PhD is, so first of all, most people, when they're done with their PhD, I remember I was quite tired. after my PhD, because I probably didn't manage it really well. So I rushed at the end like crazy. Like I was in the military before. So I went into a military shift mode. So I only slept 4 hours every 8 hours. Right. So because I was delayed. So anyway, I was tired. And so basically postdoc really helped me kind of open up and kind of learn new things and move forward and kind of really define kind of what my journey is. I would have done a really different journey after my PhD than after my postdoc. So I believe it's important. I think what many people do and think is that kind of a permanent position is the goal of right after the postdoc. And that may be for many people what the right goal is. For me, what I really tried to do is to find a position that had a time frame of 3 years or 5 years, not permanent, but 3 to 5 years that created more independence. So postdocs in many organizations cannot write their own proposals. I don't know about your organization, but that's what I really wanted to do, is build my own thing. So that was my goal. So my goal was not to immediately go permanent. And perhaps that's, again, if it works for you, that works, but that was actually not my goal. My goal was just to continue my journey and just add new skills to it. So less getting stuck on permanent or 10 years. I think my personal feeling is that 10 years are overrated in general. I think that on a time scale of the next decades, kind of 10-year jobs are not secure. So kind of, I would not get stuck on that. So for me, it's more about kind of in your journey, what are the next skills you want to learn? And kind of how do they fit next to the postdoc? And then it's a probabilistic thing. It's like, like whenever it's like chemistry, right? Kind of to make a special compound, right? You need many collisions, with different chemicals to make that compound. So I think that the trick is to get your name out, to go organizations that interest you, get invited to give seminars. Your postdoc, that's what their job is. Like, so I sat down with the people who were postdocs in my group, and I was a professor. It's like, where do you want to go next? And I would like get them invitations to go speak there, right? So they need, at the end, it's them, but kind of like, so what the postdoc advisor does, it's their job to open doors, right? And kind of create opportunities. And if they don't do the job, don't give up. Like, just go ask your peers. That's why it's so important to have peers. Like, hey, you work at Johnson after, could you invite me to come over and give because I'd like to work there also. It's like, be generous, kind of help others, kind of get opportunity, and kind of make the ecosystem better, right? So that's how I would do that, right? Kind of just define what the skill set is that you really want to go after, and then create create multiple interactions that get you there. And again, it's only one of them needs to be a job, right? Kind of like, okay, so I did 5 visits, I didn't get a job offer. Well, then do the 6th. Right? Kind of, it's kind of, don't get yourself and start early, right? Kind of, so you don't wait 3 months before the end of your postdoc, right? Kind of, really, part of the postdoc is get your, if you go give some talks that are your PhD still, fine. Like, most people have not seen your talk, but kind of my rule was always add something new. Like, every talk, there needs to be something new. Otherwise, I'm not giving the talk when I was a researcher, right? It's kind of, if I have nothing new to show, I'm not giving a talk. Because many people, that's a failure mode I observe with others. If they're kind of only about one thing, they get invited. Even if it's really cool, they get invited like 10 different places, then they're done. Because everybody has heard the story. So always add something new. That's my only advice in addition.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question from the audience who would like to unmute? Okay, I think we'll ask another question from the Slido then. So this question's been voted the most right now. So it is, what do you see being the most important way next-gen scientists and engineers can contribute to upcoming lunar exploration, especially with the Artemis program?
I really think the most important thing that nobody knows how to do is really how to integrate robotic and human exploration. And I think, frankly, I don't think that solution is in my generation. That solution is in yours. That needs to be invented. Part of it is field work. Go out there, learn how to do it. Part of it is getting to know, what astronauts can and cannot do. But part of it is to really come up with amazing science questions. And the robots that join the astronauts, right? So for me, that I feel that is unlocking decades of future science, whether it's at the moon, then eventually at Mars, on asteroids. I mean, there will be astronauts in many different places. And I would do that. So it's a modality. What I'm telling you is a new modality. And then the rest is just come up with amazing science questions and go tackle them, right? Even that by itself. Like there's new science, right, that can be done at the moon. And, like look at the decadal, there's a bunch of new science that is there. Like which ones can you take down, right? And have that. But the first one is just so new. It's exciting. Remember, there's also another modality that's coming. There's going to be a lot of commercial landers on the surface of the moon, not just clips. There's other ways. People will go to the moon. So the question is, how do you take advantage of those? Like where is there science in which multiple touchdowns on the moon is enabling the science, right? I don't know what they are. Seismology, right? I don't know, perhaps. I kind of so that's another, like, how do I turn around things because of the fact that you're going many times, can you actually build a novel type of instrument that's far less kind of the slow space type of instrument that is out there, that you can build in 2 years as opposed to 7 years. Like go buy it from whatever instrument provider and perhaps you change only one electronics board so it actually works. That's it. Fly it. Try it. Oh, it doesn't work. Let's try it again, right? So for me, so focus on new modalities. It's not just on new science, because remember, science gets done for one of two reasons. Breakthrough science, either it's a new thought, entirely new thought, that matter. Second one, it's a new approach, right? Kind of a new device is invented. So for me, I would just say the modality kind of device space is opening up in front of you. So I would really look at those. The moon is the best place to go try to learn these things by far.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you. I think we have some audience questions. Heather, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Heather Meyer at APL. I am also technically early career, even though I'm a senior staff in a permanent position. But since we were talking about the CLIPS program and the deliveries to the moon and how many there are and people are going to the moon and Artemis is going back and all that, that's all great. But the community is sort of overextended trying to support CLIPS and PRISM. And so you're kind of in a unique position to answer my question. So the decadal identified Endurance as the highest priority lunar mission to fly that should be flown. How do we argue for Endurance A? How do we support that going when we have all these CLIPS deliveries happening? Because the lunar community is sort of at odds here. We're sort of at a disadvantage because we're bearing the burden of getting the commercial companies going. And no one is really complaining about that because, we finally get a chance to send something to the moon. That's awesome, right? And we're all for the high risk approach here because we can try things out. I think that's amazing. But it also means that when we ask for things like huge missions like Endurance, we're going to kind of get kicked back because we already have so much relative to other programs, for example, except Mars. And so I guess what I'm wondering is how you would suggest we go about bringing endurance to fruition when we also have to support and, we don't want to lose for sure the CLIPS and PRISM programs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, you went from a bad problem to a good problem.
Yes,
The
it is
bad
a good problem
was
for
that
sure.
the bad problem was you had no lunar program other than kind of things that were on, spare flame, and you went to a good problem, which is you have too much.
Yep.
So I always like good problems over bad problems, but there's still a problem. So you're identifying it right. My personal feeling is that the likelihood of endurance is 100%. It will happen. So the trick is how to figure it out, how to do. So kind of the challenge that NASA has right now, kind of, suppose I was sat at NASA. Here's what I would, so first of all, I already tried to figure out whether I could squeeze it in last year into the budget that just came out. And I just couldn't do it because of all the other things. Planetary is kind of in trouble. Just because of the fact that launch windows are launch windows, the only way we had to handle COVID is by spending more money. So heliophysics, for example, earth science are not in trouble that much because you can just move missions by a few weeks to the right. So you don't have to necessarily spend more money to do that, right? Kind of in planetary, just like we cannot move at all, we need to spend more money. And so, so that's, so I could not squeeze it in. I also didn't know who could do it. So
yeah, that's certainly something we're discussing, is who actually has the capability or
right.
who could develop it. And I think there's like 2 options at this time,
Yeah.
which is quite interesting too.
So for me, I fundamentally see 2 options, and I'm going to suggest, you need to look at both and figure out which one is more promising. The first one is a traditional option in which you go to one of the centers. APL is one, JPL is another, whatever is a third, Ames perhaps, whatever. Like go to one of those kind of NASA centers or associates, right? And kind of do the rover and then do the science, whatever, and develop it. There's actually another option with lunar mobility basically being driven now also out of human exploration. There's a number of commercial options. So kind of the CLIP side of it, there's commercial options that are there. And frankly, there's opportunities to get that done much, much faster with that other version. I was not sure which one the right one is, but suppose I was in your shoes, Heather, right? Kind of, I would look at those and really go look under the hood. It's like, what's really there? The one thing I can guarantee you, if you're waiting, and I'm sorry if I'm offending somebody, I don't mean to, but let me just do it anyway. If you think JPL is going to solve that problem for you, you're going to wait till the 30s.
Yep, we already know that JPL is not interested actually in that particular concept.
And they probably listen to headquarters, because the point is they're so in over their head. They have too much work. They should be focused on Mars sample return, get that done successfully and within cost. And let others do it. Like Ames could do it possibly, but we could also run. I mean, let me tell you something that may not be public, but let me tell you, Viper going to launch in 25, I believe now, or 24, I forgot when exactly. Focused on volatiles. It's a great thing. It's done by Ames and by Johnson. So what we did to kind of afford the risk, we actually built each one of the instruments twice. And our reserve strategy is that if something goes bad with Viper, we immediately go back out and get a commercial rover and put the instruments on it and go. So we're not rebuilding Viper, which is another way of saying, if we did Viper today, we would not build a rover. We just use a commercial rover. So I just want you to know, in our mind, we already made that leap on the inside of headquarters. So kind of as you look at endurance, right? Kind of for me, I would look at that. The good news is, once you look at the commercial side, you have another stakeholder that can help you. Frankly, you could even scar in endurance study money now on the Hill in the budget that's there through congressional interactions, add that on top with stakeholders like that. So that's how I would go about it, Heather.
Yeah, that's really helpful because I at APL we have a whole bunch of lunar scientists, and so we've kind of been thinking like if this is the thing that the decadal survey says we should be pursuing, you know, regardless of what great stuff's happening with CLIPS and PRISM, then we need to find a way to make that happen. And we just don't want to be penalized because we're trying to help get this commercial program going and get the tech ready for not just us, but everyone else too. And I think the outstanding right now is that we don't have a rover of that scale from any commercial provider yet. It doesn't mean there won't be, but I guess we're not there yet. So I suppose endurance is fundamentally limited for the next, probably the most of the decade.
Well,
but I hope that comes soon.
I actually think NASA is really interested in doing endurance. I just want you to know. Recall, I'm sitting in until December in every highest level meeting. So Heather, do not worry. Come up with a good idea and propose it to NASA. I think they're good, that people want to make it happen. They just haven't figured out how. So you and your teams can really come up with ideas. The only thing that's dead on arrival is a traditional approach. It's too expensive, right? You know, if endurance is $2 billion, you cannot do it. It doesn't fit. But I don't think it should be $2 billion. I just don't think it should be $2 billion. It makes absolutely no sense. Even the rover that has astronauts in it is not $2 billion. And, you know, it has all the life stuff on it too, right? It's way harder to build.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is that the ideal case is sample return from endurance. That's the end result, which ends up being the most expensive part.
Exactly right. But the astronauts want to do that anyway.
Yep.
So kind of for me, like
agree.
I would not worry. So what I would basically say, like the only problem I need to solve is deliver a huge package of amazing samples at a location. That's what the scientists need to figure out. And the human explorers need to bring it back. There's going to be missions to the moon. They need to be. Like, look, there's only two ways. There's multiple missions to the moon or none. Because like if there's not many missions to the moon, there's no program that really pulls us into Mars. So I always gamble for success, Heather. So kind of for me, don't solve that problem. Don't worry. Like they will tell you we're not ready. Yes, fine. Communicate to them how heavy the samples is. Like, oh, well, you go work on it. I'm going to work on this. Remember what's going to happen next week. I don't know whether Starship is going to be successful, but suppose it is. That changed the entire discussion. There's a number of things like that that will come up in the next few years. All of them move in a direction of making this more successful and more likely for you. So what you should focus on is get the rover and the collection mechanism. What's the AI? What's the radio stuff is already in orbit. You don't have to solve that anymore. We solved that already for both robotic and human exploration. We're already doing that. Europeans are helping. So you can roam wherever you want to. You have connection. So you need to have a rover that survives the night, and you need to figure out the right samples. Those are the problems and cart them off. So that's what you need to solve.
And I think this is a super productive conversation because I think a lot of the community has held off on things like that because JPL has done it. And so now knowing that JPL is not likely to be the solution, then we need a competitor. And not even necessarily a competitor, but a collaborator to invest in that kind of technology. So this is a really helpful discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for that question, Heather. That was a great discussion. Saeed, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, I'm Saeed from UCLA, PhD student. So you mentioned the need for new ideas. You had, like, you sort of briefly mentioned seismology, and I was I'm a seismologist, or hope training to be one at least. And I was wondering if you knew of any ideas to or plans to send like a distributed acoustic center or fiber optic cable to a planetary body. Like, is that in the works? Did you recall hearing that while you were at NASA?
So I had multiple people that showed up and talked about seismology networks. Most of them looked rather traditional that I've seen. You know what they are like. So I don't think I've seen any things kind of the order that you mentioned that are really kind of novel. And for me, this is precisely the kind of stuff that's possible to go try. I put one of those kind of fiber optic kind of these kind of novel sensors, put one up and go get experience with it, right? So for me, that's what I really think is easier to try to figure out. Like, so the barrier to entry is not as high as in other planetary fields. So no, I'm not aware of anything kind of at that level, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I do not recall anything at my desk. And remember, I only get things that are kind of at the right size that they come to me, right? Kind of if you go lower. So God, what's Brad Bailey, right? Is Joel Kern's deputy. So I would ask him, like, hey, are you aware of any? Because he's the kind of lead scientist of that group. So I'm sure he would answer, or one of his people, whoever they are.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Saeed. I think we'll ask one from the Slido. So what sorts of roles can one take that are important for driving lunar science, but aren't necessarily leadership based?
Well, I mean, I think there's many roles that really, really matter, and not all of them are leadership, right? Being a great scientist and really coming up with new ideas, they're not people leadership, they're thought leadership, and they're really what is the bread and butter, I would say, of a science community. So we need people who do that. I think the other set of roles that are out there is communication roles that are really critical. I think kind of as we try to inspire, I mean, we still don't have enough PhD students from a diverse set of fields, right? How do we get people into research organizations, kind of really make the environments healthy and kind of supportive of a diverse set of candidates, right? It's kind of, there's jobs like that. And then there's also, I think what happens kind of at this kind of interface between engineering and science, there's quite a number of opportunities kind of that are there. I know a number of people who have taken those jobs. And then many of the jobs will be invented as we go. Like I once did a study. So I looked at everyone in my PhD class, kind of plus minus 5 years, and I looked what they did. And I figured out that 50% of the jobs that people had were not invented when I did my PhD. And remember, that's like 20 years later. So kind of do not be surprised. There's a lot of jobs that will be invented as you go forward.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, thank you. Does anyone from the audience want to unmute themselves to ask a question? Also, if you don't want to unmute yourself, just a reminder, you can type in your question into Slido, and Amanda will send the link.
How long? I just want to make sure that I know the expectations. How long do you expect the meeting to last?
Oh, I think we're going to go until 10:30.
All right, good. I just wanted to be sure that that's clear. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so if no one from the audience wants to unmute themselves, I can ask a question from Slido. So one of the questions that's been upvoted is, did you ever regret leaving science for leadership roles?
Not really, actually. And let me tell you why. So look, I mean, I have like 200 publications, like 10 of them, perhaps it's only 8, are in Science or Nature, right? So many of them have good citations and so forth. But I figured out there are people who are better at it than I am. And I just really tried to figure out, how can I help the community overall? And kind of for me, so it was less about, I want to be in charge. It was more about, like, how can I create more opportunities for more scientists? Because I believe in science being a really positive force in the world and kind of really, enlarging the space in which we think and live in. And for me, how can I contribute to that? I could be doing, right, the 205th paper, or I could be helping others writing their first, right? Kind of so I decided to do that. So for me, I mean, that's how I try to look at the world, always kind of like, what are we achieving? And so it's less about building my resume. I always thought that was kind of an old-fashioned way of looking at it, right? You know, if it's like, by the way, I want to warn you, my version is not the successful version. If you want to be a traditionally successful, right now, what science values are, selfish people in labs or in offices. That's like, if you look who's in the national academies, it's only the people who are thought leaders that have come up with ideas, not the ones like, there's thousands of people working on a James Webb Space Telescope. The scientist who actually made that happen very likely will not be rewarded sufficiently by the science community. So just warning that, I mean, by the way, you should change that. But, you know, the future belongs to super teams, not to superstars. So I really believe that is also needs to happen in science. So I just want to warn you, kind of know that when I'm speaking about a guy who doesn't really value so much those traditional metrics. If you value them, then, you know, like, be aware of that. You're taking a risk.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think it's always good to, like, I don't know, give credit to the full team rather than just like a single person. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's just my point is like the James Webb Space Telescope, right? Kind of the scientists who made that happen, like Paul Hertz at NASA headquarters. Without him, there's no Webb. He's not even a fellow of the American Association for, you know, the Astronomy Association people, like the equivalent of AGU. He's not even a fellow there. You see, the science community does not value him as a, you know, so for me, like, okay, so does that make sense, right? Not everybody who has a job with a title should be valued that way. That's not my point either. But when it comes to these things, like, what are we actually valuing? Like, you know, yes, it's the whole team, but also the people that actually make these missions happen. Yeah. Anyway, it's just food for thought. I just thought it's important to give you the warning. If you take my kind of trajectory, the traditional metrics that many people use sometimes are not accessible to you. There's others, by the way. I won a lot of awards from leadership and kind of engineering type of organizations because they get that better than the scientists do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Does anyone want to unmute and ask a question? Or I can ask another one from the slido. This is, again, kind of thinking about NASA in general. What are your hopes for the future of the CLIPS program and NASA's collaboration with commercial lunar exploration and maybe even commercial exploration beyond the moon?
So my hope is that commercial platforms and partnerships kind of provide more science per dollar. So kind of my hope would be whether it's a seismologist, whether it's you or somebody else in this group can come up during a PhD with an experiment. Like they would if they were in geology and then travel to the Himalayas and do that experiment. They can do that with the moon. Because basically what happens is a platform will fly to the moon with regular basis, right? If there's humans there, we need to bring food there. We need to bring, you know, so we're just going to fly to the moon, right? So kind of the question is, like, what do we bring in the baggage, so to say? And so for me, what my hope is that these kind of commercial platforms provide that. That's what happens in the space station right now, right? So it's kind of that model gets there. My hope also is that helps Earth science. It also helps other planetary bodies over time. I think kind of a CLIPS type model should be working for Mars too. You know, especially where we go with human explorers also. It should really be there also. But you could even imagine kind of a more kind of standardized type of approach for space missions. So kind of instead of highly sophisticated billion-dollar things, you do it at more $200 million with standardized platforms and just go. Now, not all science can be done that way. My only point is some science can be done that way that is really fruitful. For example, if you were interested in asteroid work, why is it not better to visit 100 asteroids with 10 missions instead of 10 asteroids with one mission that's 50 times more expensive? Do you know what I mean? So it's like, so for me, it's those kind of trades. That's what's happening in Earth science now. Kind of like these kind of small sat missions with standardized platforms. Also there, we haven't fully adapted. But my hope is that commercial platforms really unlock opportunities to create more science, different science, and more science per dollar. Those are the two goals I'm trying to achieve.
No, I think that's great. I mean, the commercial collaborations have completely changed the face of space exploration and the future of it. So you kind of see CLIPS as like a blueprint for moving forward for other planetary bodies exploration, like applying the same ideas that we're trying to do on the moon. If it works, hopefully.
Yeah, and remember, it's not just my idea. The Decadal recommended that.
Yeah.
So it's like the community thinks that that's what we should do as a community. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. And I think, Heather made a comment. We need the option of a campaign science on CLIPS/PRISM missions.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we've been discouraged so far from that. And I think that's just because they want more and different to support different groups. But once we get to the level where we can support campaign science, I think that's actually a game changer.
Oh, I agree. And so let me tell you, if I was at NASA headquarters, what I would do. I would do a review of the whole CLIPS program in 2005. I would announce that today before we land. And in 2005, I basically maximized the science. So I get from an experimental version to really driving towards more science output with the companies that have made it, right? So I would really get out of that search mode. You have to start with a search mode, Heather, right? Kind of not overload it. At least that was my theory. You have to start fast, do not overload it, kind of do opportunistic science, but it also there needs to flip. And so basically, I think kind of 2005 is the time to do it.
I totally agree. We're getting there.
Yeah, exactly right.
And you have to expect failure too at this stage. And the hope is that they'll learn from those failures, and then the next generation of these missions will be much more productive.
And the reason I would announce 2005 now is because you tell everybody, I'm going to wait till 2005 to make a decision. So if the first two CLIPS landers don't work, you already have said, I'm waiting till 2005. So I'll take 2 more shots on goal.
That would be very smart of NASA to say something like that. I think we've been kind of disappointed in the communication of a strategy here. But I agree with what you said about starting out with the trial and error and see what shakes out, and then move on to the focused science missions, like really truly focused on optimizing science, and not just starting tech.
Yeah, and Heather, you realize we already changed, right? From everyone just to propose their instrument to do suites, and the next one is really the next step. So we're moving in that direction, right? And I think that's what everybody wants. I don't think...
being on a PRISM mission, I can say for sure that we're very grateful we started to move in that direction.
Yeah. By the way, there's no blueprint for this, right? So we're just trying to figure it out, right? And the good news, what's really important, like I'll repeat something I already said. What's really important that you provide feedback. Hey, these are the challenges. I think there are pieces that are missing. Here's the piece that's missing. And hey, we really need to move in that direction. I think that's what's there. And see, the reason I didn't drive a strategy from the front, I actually felt it's not possible. At the beginning, I stopped people because people want to always see, ultimately NASA is a very strong bureaucracy. When you lock yourself into a strategy, it's really hard to move off it. So it's actually, what I tried very hard is to keep the space open and let things evolve in it. For example, one question is it actually driving workforce opportunities up? That worked. Like actually one of the things that made me most happy was that the core, right, kind of the Apollo core, the Angster core, really drove a whole new set of opportunities for kind of grad students and postdocs. That's what I was hoping, because like the worst that can happen is like we go to the moon and we bring back samples and nobody's there who was really eager to use it. So they may just add a data point to the old charts. Like I want new questions, right? And so kind of what we need to do is start that. So for me, so kind of a lot of the stuff that we now know, we didn't know in 2016, right? So the good news is it's moving in the right direction. And I think just like in these innovative things, right, kind of input is really critical, and providing that input and you know, assuming positive intent from everybody, because I just wanted to know kind of in these meetings, we always talked about the early career lunar scientists. We always talked about like, how do we make sure we create enough stability in these kind of environments, and then also how do we drive it forward?
Yeah, and I think your comments about the strategy are well taken, because you have to see how this is going to work out before you can really make a plan. But we are trying, like, arguably such a strategy should probably come from, or at least be supported by, the community. And it seems that NASA is getting around to a strategy, but the engaging with the community on that strategy doesn't seem to be as clear. And I know that there are people who are trying to make that happen. Like, for example, Brett Denevi just gave a talk to the at the Space Studies Board for exactly that reason, right? To make sure that the community's input on any kind of strategy moving ahead is heard. So we're trying to communicate on that front. And I think it's going to crystallize pretty quickly here with the cadence of the PRISM and CLIPS calls. So I'm pretty excited about where we're headed at this point. But I do think, as an early career person, retention is a pretty scary prospect right now, because it seems that there are quite a few people leaving the field. And I hope that doesn't stay, because there's so many new opportunities that weren't around for the people, the generation above us. So I'm hoping that turns around.
I also agree with that, but my gut feeling is, colleagues, that there are pieces that are still missing in the field, like an extended fellowship piece. I don't know, a CLIPS fellow. I'm making it up as I go, right? Kind of, I think kind of creating more opportunity kind of at that pivotal point right now is really critical, I think, for the time being, just really getting more landing spots. Because like what we don't want to do, like what happens sometimes in these pipeline problems is like all the pieces need to fall in line. So I tried very hard kind of together with our team, right, kind of to really ignite the opportunity space, but then build the bridge ahead of it so that we don't lose things. And especially in the lunar community, where we really want so much opportunity, you really need to communicate together with your, you know, whether it's the league or whatever, you know, the organizations basically said, look, this is what we need. Give them, the NASA people are, they're really amazing and selfless people, the vast majority of them. And you should just know how they really want to do the best for the community. Like I've been in so many meetings, and I just was hoping that there was a camera and a microphone, because so often from the outside, it's like, what are these doofuses thinking, right? Well, they're solving other problems that you never see because they actually solve them. Because like some of them existential problems, right, that came up, right? But, you know, like they really care for it, but, you know, help them do their job. Providing input is a really good thing, you know, and find a champion. And I just forgot her name. She's representing, you know, Joel and Brad in so many things. She works at Johnson, I believe. God, I just forgot her name. She's just done such a wonderful job representing science also in these discussions with human exploration. And, you know, just, she would be a person to talk to. I will come to my mind and I'll send it to you. So I mean, she is just incredible.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think there's one thing that you just said that brought to mind about the pipeline, and that is that the conventional path, the traditional path for scientists, relies on publications, among other things. And so when you're working on missions, and I'm a good example of this, actually, when you're working on missions, you're not publishing. And so if you try to compete, you know, I'm very lucky to be at APL, which values my technical contributions and not just my publications. But if you're in the traditional path, you're actually at a disadvantage participating in a lot of these missions. And so there might be something that NASA could do to better support those people. I'm not sure what that is at this point, but it might be worth discussing at some point.
I think it's worth discussing. And yes, you know, being a hardware guy, I know what you're talking about. So I know that there's, we're not going to solve it here, right? But I think my point is engage in that discussion because your voices are actually the critical ones. That's really my message.
I'm not shy. I'll do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Does anyone else from the audience want to unmute themselves? We have a few minutes left still for questions. No, okay, we can ask one from the Slido. This one is an interesting one. So kind of in working in your role, Thomas, how do you buff yourself against all the opinions of the community on each single decision, prioritizing different missions over other ones? I know you must have had to make a lot of difficult decisions.
Well, so first of all, I consider myself working for the community. So actually, I want to hear from the community, but the way I did it is less talking to individuals. So we actually, at the National Academies, there's the Space Studies Board. Somebody just mentioned it. Somebody gave a talk there, right? There's also advisory. There's also advisory groups, right? And, league. So we look at these inputs and I really try to pattern match what's there. I'll be honest, right? Almost every day I called like 2 scientists, usually from work, right? And just chatted, like, how is it going? Like every visit I did to an organization I met, it's very rare that there's an exception. I met for an hour with early career scientists, right? Kind of just like, how is it going? What do you think we're missing, right? And just kind of really getting a sense of how things are going. Like at the beginning, we had amazing problems, just horrific problems, like some of them you mentioned in your introduction, right? Harassment issues, right? Well, so I don't know, that's not very public, but I fired 5 PIs, right? And we can't make those public because they're HR things and it's not fair to them or anybody. But the point is, like, actually, it's our job to make progress in this, right? Kind of, we will not accept certain behaviors. I'll go after that, right? So is enough done? No, we're moving the ball, right? So for me, listening to the community is really good. But at the end, see, the thing about a leader kind of in the job that I occupy and others occupy now. So you have authority and you have accountability. So at the end, with all that input, make the right decision. And sometimes the decision is actually not what the people tell you, because there's other factors that you might not get from the community. So you need the wisdom to figure that out, but then make the best decision that you can and learn as best as you can. And every once in a while, you're going to make a mistake. So, and I can give you a few, right? But you have to learn to live with your own mistakes, right? So it's kind of, but it's not, so it's not a mistake because I got angry and I did something stupid, right? It's a mistake because I misinterpreted what was, do you see what I'm saying? Like I perhaps did not have all the data or I misinterpreted the data and I went the wrong path. And in many cases, I actually talk to people. It's like, hey, you were on the wrong side of a decision. I want to tell you, in retrospect, I'll give you one, just so you know what I'm talking about. Remember Laurie Glaze, who is the head of planetary? The first decision I made on discovery missions, I would have selected her if I had the right data. I had the wrong data. It doesn't matter who got selected in addition, but I got wrong data on workforce and availability of workforce. And it took her mission off the table. She had a wonderful mission. And I created the biggest disappointment in her life. Because, and frankly, it's what it is, right? Now, how bad was that for the community? First of all, look how amazing she is. Like I got to know her as part of that. She's like, that's an incredible leader. I looked at her as like I gave her that bad news. So as an AA, I gave everybody bad news myself. I never delegated bad news down because I think it's weak. It's weak. If you create bad news, you give it to people directly. And that creates personal struggles, but I never delegated it. So I got to know her, and when she got when I needed a division director, I gave her a call out of the call and basically said, look, I got to know you here. You have 24 hours to make the following decision. Do you want to come and be a division director for 6 months? After 6 months, you need to compete for the job, because my environment, everybody competes for the jobs. If you believe in diversity, you compete for jobs. You don't just appoint number 2. I don't believe in that. Like, you look at all candidates and you compete. So what she did, right? She did, after 12 hours, she called me and said, I'll take the job. Like, out of the blue, she could not anticipate it. It's coming, right? And you see that. And then again, risk taking and, like just putting the community on the line. And she's done such an amazing job. So I made a mistake. She knows I made a mistake because I told her. And I told her what I got wrong and why. So it's not that I loved her mission. And by the way, it's selected now. Da Vinci. It's selected now, but and it's doing really well. But I loved her mission, but I made a mistake. And again, I could write a book about my mistakes, but the good news is that mistake created one of the best leaders for planetary science in the history of the planetary program. And that mistake created a leader who figured out how to deal with difficult discussions and decisions because she went through it herself. And so, she had no fault. And she went through it herself. So kind of in difficult discussions, she did that. So mistakes are part of life. And but what you do is you do the best job, because not making a decision is also a decision. And kind of it's not in the interest of the science community. So for me, that's just a story for you. By the way, Lori told that story herself, minus the Thomas made a mistake. She never said that in public. I told her I made a mistake because she needed to know why. What the data are that I looked at, that I was given. And of course, I fixed that data input. Like, that mistake cannot happen again. So.
Oh yeah, thank you for that story. Yeah, that's super interesting to hear the background of that. Yeah. Oh, okay. So I think we're wrapping up now. If you guys have any more questions for Thomas, feel free to send them to us, and we can see if you can ask them via email if he's open to that. And yeah, I just want to thank everyone for coming. We actually are recruiting for our organizing committee for NextGen. So if you're interested in that, please apply. We're looking for at-large members and also some specific roles like the EDI lead and events lead as well. So you can help organize events like this one. And it's a great opportunity to meet new people in the community. Yeah. And yeah, so I just want to thank Dr. Zurbuchen for coming and joining us and giving us all this incredible advice and all of his thoughts on the future workforce. It's been a great event. Yeah, thank you. And
thank you.
Yeah, I think we'll
Thanks so much, everybody. I really
you.
appreciate it. And good luck to everybody, okay?
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.